There's not really anything at our director level that has come down. So what I know about it from that standpoint is what I've picked up from my own research. However, something that we have done in the last, I would say 5 years.
Can I ask you just one question before you move on?
You bet.
Given the silence around critical race theory kind of in your immediate environment, what did you initially take it to be? Because like you're saying, it's all over the news. People are talking about it all the time. And so what did you think it was before you actually had the opportunity to conduct your own investigation?
I had no clue.
Uh-huh.
No clue. I thought that it was, again, an issue of misunderstanding of race.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't know. But we have worked for the last 5 years, with a company called West Wind, WESTWIND. It's a company out of Iowa City, and they engage in equity work with large organizations and school districts. And since we've had these conversations dating back 30 years, then we have not really had action. There's, again, a lot of talk and not a lot of action. So we have spent the last 3 years as an admin team, and that goes for principals, lead teachers, coaches, all the way up to the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, the directors, the HR director, really digging into what equity looks like. And we started off by really looking at implicit bias. Are you familiar with implicit bias? Some people are, some people aren't. Implicit bias is those things that we're brought up on, that we are raised, it's how we are raised. And there are some things that we don't even realize that we do that could be racist or offensive. So we have done a lot of work on what are some of our implicit biases that we have experienced and digging into that. And then we've taken it back down into our staff level. And I've done activities with my staff in the gym, and it gets emotional. It's hard work. But if you don't have those open conversations with people, you're never gonna get anywhere. You're not gonna be able to understand where someone is coming from. Have any of you seen the Ocho, his talk show? Okay. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The what show?
Ocho.
Ocho.
Emmanuel
No.
Ocho.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that, but I know you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He does Real Talk with a Black Man, I believe is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And he opens up and has real conversations about race with other people, other actors. He's an NFL player, former NFL player. And it's really interesting because that's kind of what we're doing within our schools, is opening it up and seeing how race and our perceptions and our implicit bias actually impacts the way that we teach. There are things that we do unknowingly, and you don't know what you don't know until you know, but we have to change that. So we have done activities in the gym where I've talked about the way that people are raised to show differences. We have looked at data and seen how discrepant our activities are, how discrepant they are for our students in what we are providing for interest within our text, our literature. Opportunities for writing. How are we incorporating other cultures? And we're not done. It's an ongoing process. It's something that we will never be done with because it comes up in everyday life. And one thing that I just know, I believe to my core, is you have to talk and ask questions if you don't know, but find someone who is open enough and willing enough to talk to you, because not everyone is, you can't walk up to a stranger on the street and ask a really blatant question. But I have a lot of people that are around me and my experiences where I can go to them and I can ask them questions where I might not understand. So I don't really know where I was going with a lot of this. I just wanted to
let me ask you a question. Given you've talked about implicit bias, and I believe that's one of the things that they say you shouldn't be teaching. I guess the law says that,
right.
that House File 182 says you're not, you're not able to teach about implicit bias because it's going to target somebody. And like you said, feelings come out,
Right.
and you're not allowed to make people feel uncomfortable. So here you're, this,
We're doing it.
building administrator. Yeah. So what's behind that decision, and how would you, how have you come to that decision, given that, okay, now the House of Representatives passed a law that says you're not doing it. So why are you persevering, and what's the rationale behind that?
So they passed the law after we had finished with Westwind and done some of that work, which was kind of good because in one sense it gives us the opportunity to really dig in and understand implicit bias. I'll give you an example. My grandfather was in the Army and very straightforward kind of guy. He was a big guy. He was 6'4" and the milkman. Drove truck, like literally the milkman. Drove truck for a while and just kind of a very strange sense of humor. And it wasn't until I was actually in Houston when I realized some of the things that he had said, I would catch myself having that belief system in my head. Slavery. His viewpoints and the way that he was raised and his understanding of what slavery was is passed on to our interactions. That is what implicit bias is. It's the way you're raised and how you are articulating things to others that shows your implicit bias. So for us, how are we ever going to make progress if we don't come together and try to understand where each other stands? I just believe so strongly that I'm even working with some staff members now. There's some race tension, and it's felt, it's real, and you have to acknowledge it. We're slipping back into the 1900s, early 1900s, 1800s, when we neglect to acknowledge where other people are and understand their culture, their philosophy on life. So for us to have done this work, I'm really disappointed that they passed that bill, because I feel like it is closing the box on something that needs to be let out, something that needs to be explored. We're in a world where everybody feels at each other right now, and schools can't be that way. We're teaching kids that what you learn at home is okay and what you learn at school doesn't really matter, by saying we can't have those open and honest conversations. And that's not true. I feel like it brings, and this is my personal opinion, but I feel like it brings it undermines education and educators. And it's hard. It's really hard to want to share with students and be able to tell someone they're wrong about especially students, because students say what they learn at home, right? It's hard to not be able to say, well, you're not right because you're misunderstanding how they see the world.
What kind of advice do you give to your teachers about, let's say, interactions with parents or those sorts of situations where the students are bringing, what they've been taught at home into the classroom? What are some of the kind of, tips that you're giving teachers on how to handle those kinds of, delicate situations?
So if you are having conversations with parents, that's a good thing, first of all, because you have to have conversations, and sometimes it's difficult to engage parents because of their past experience with teachers and their students. So I encourage my teachers to ask questions, continuously ask questions. Am I hearing this right? Use that phrase a lot. Is this what you're meaning? I'm hearing you say X, Y, Z. Or can you tell me more about this? Help me learn. And a lot of our parents are willing to have those conversations. We're kind of a unique building out here because we don't have a ton of diversity. That was kind of culture shock for me coming back from Houston. We are a primarily white school. We have multi-race children. 99% of our population is multi-race, but we are primarily white. And so that's another realm that gets twisted into it, because if you drive through the streets of Evansdale, you're gonna see everything from F Biden, go Trump, to everything. That's the one that's sticking out in my head, because I've had a parent call the city and then she called me to see if there was anything I could do to get it removed. So, I mean, like, and people are very proud out here. They're very loud, and they have a way of doing things and saying things that is not as typical as other places. And I'm not saying that to scare you off, because it's not a scary place to be, but you have to ask those questions. You have to get into conversations. And if my teachers ever get into a conversation where they're starting to feel uncomfortable, first of all, that's good, because that means that you're starting to reach the crux of what's happening between you and the family. But I also invite them to invite me into the conversation so I can help guide if necessary. As principals, we've done fishbowl activities where they give us a topic, and then they have us sit in a couple of chairs, and then the gallery watches and then gives feedback on how that parent conversation went. It's hard. It's not easy work, but it's good work. It's work worth doing. So just continue, like I said, ask questions. You're never gonna go wrong with asking questions. And make sure you do it in a tactful way. Learn as much as you can about the family, who they are, how they live their lives. That's gonna be the most impactful for you as a teacher, and also dealing with the children. It helps you connect with them. It helps me understand when they're writing a story that has some pretty interesting concepts, why they might write something like that. Well, I know where they live, I know who their family is, and I probably taught their mother. So I have those connections. I have 20 years of experience that I've been able to use and guide, and you aren't gonna know everything. It takes years and years. I've been doing this for 20-ish years, and I still don't know everything. I learn every day. Questions? Tough topic. People get scared about it because they're afraid of offending someone. And we have to move past that and move to an understanding. I sat in one of our meetings, and I'm not going to name any names because we agreed to be confidential. That's a really key component to having these conversations, but I can tell you about this experience. I was sitting with a group of women principals, and out of curiosity, we had watched videos and talked about the movie 13th. Have you ever seen that movie? It's on Netflix. It is, I don't have words to describe it. It can make you cry. It's deep. But we had watched parts of that movie, and we had all these conversations about women, in particular Black women, and the job. And so I asked a couple of my coworkers who were Black, I said, how are you able, like, what has your experience been? And they just kind of sat there for a minute, and one of them looked at me and she said, I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question. I've just always, she said, I feel like it's been twice as hard. I've just always done everything I possibly can, but I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. Because it's a tough, tough world. And being a woman leader, Black woman leader, are very different too. Because there's a respect there that some people don't have. And they have to deal with it from parents. They have to deal with it from kids. Again, kids, that's the way they're being brought up. We don't excuse it, and that's where it gets hard with this critical race theory, because we can't turn around and say, that's not right. I'm sorry you misunderstood. Here's what it really means. But afterwards, I had a note and a bag of chips on my place where I was sitting, saying thank you for that open, honest conversation, because one of the things that I had said, I think it was around when we talk about how I'm not racist, I love all colors, and they were like, that's so offensive, like my color doesn't matter. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never thought about it like that. I said it out of a place of like love and endearment, and not crushing, not trying to diminish you. But now that I know that, I can do better. And that conversation was in front of an entire room, which is not always easy either. Don't really have that relationship with everybody in the room. But I had the bag of chips with the note on it that said, thank you so much for being honest and for having that conversation. I have a newfound respect for you. So it was the opening doors to a new relationship and learning. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have any advice for teachers talking about race with students?
That's a good question. Whew. I think you have to welcome it. We've had a couple of teachers in our literature that we have through our Fontes and Pinnell curriculum. It has really, it's been interesting to see some of the topics that have come up in conversation, and allowing students, my teachers have really allowed students to have dialogue in a controlled way. That's the biggest thing. Like, there has to be an understanding of respect. There has to be some norms or some standards that are set when you're having those conversations. This is what we will do, this is what we won't do, before you can even dig into those conversations. That's first and foremost. And sometimes it's better if you're not starting out in a large group setting. Take it small. Invite kids in through lunch, during recess. Start that way. As they've grown and they have learned, and even some of the literature that they've read, they've started asking more questions, and it's done a lot of work around how to have discourse. You have to teach kids how to talk to each other, and that's hard. Like, even math talk moves and reading literature discussions. You have to teach them how to talk, how to respond to things, and again, just set those norms. Other questions? Yes.
This isn't necessarily about race, but another sensitive subject, I guess. But I know the topic of sexual orientation and how kids are starting to see themselves as becoming more and more popular. Do you deal with any of that at this young of an age? I mean, I know.
Yep.
Yeah. How do you? I don't know what my question is exactly, but what is?
I get what you're saying. I'm also kind of unique because I've worked K-12. I've literally worked kindergarten through 12th grade. I've been a teacher 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. And then I have done some 8th grade summer writing camps. I've been an administrator at 2 high schools, one in Houston, one here. And that topic has really become fire lately. And it's really interesting to hear how other people's perceptions of the law reads. So there was when I was at West High, they started to talk about like being able to use the restrooms of however they identify. And I heard one administrator say, "Oh, hell no, that is not happening." Don't really have a say. So we had to have a discussion around what that looks like and sounds like, and some designated areas. There are a lot of more supports at the high school level for students LGBTQ. They have some groups that meet after school and will talk to each other and be there for each other. There's usually a teacher that leads it. And then middle school, kids are really lost. I feel like that's an area that we need to beef up a little bit more. We need to find ways to support students who are coming out or trying to figure out what they are. And then in elementary, we have students that, again, are exploring their options. I'm not sure if that's the right term. But they are, I can think of 2 cases in particular where we've had a couple of girls who want to be boys. And we did have a boy who wanted to be a girl, wanted to change his name and everything. Ironically, COVID hit, and he came back and was wearing skirts and headbands and eye makeup, and we changed his name for him to her. He has a twin. So they were in separate classes, unfortunately, but she was a support system for her. And there were kids, you'd be interesting how resilient kids are most of the time. But there's cruelty that comes with trying to define yourself and come out as who you really are. And we have to empower kids to embrace who they are. Our counselor does an amazing job and meets with people. I take it very seriously. I can remember the parent who was very supportive of her came up and there was a bullying incident. The kids were being mean, and I don't tolerate that. So I called the parent up, and she was just shocked. She was like, I didn't expect this kind of support from an elementary, let alone, at any school. And I said, no, we want kids to be comfortable and be who they are at school. It's okay. So again, it was conversations and a lot of talking to parents, and there are some parents who are adamant, I don't want my child having anything to do with her or him. Okay, I understand that, but at school, we will be respectful. We will follow the rules. If we can't do that, then we're gonna have to look at other options. And unfortunately, in elementary, we don't have a lot. We have no alternative placement program. At least at the middle school and high school, they have expo and those type of placements.
Do you think kids have been accepting besides, I just talked about bullying and some kids, but have a majority of kids been accepting?
Yeah, we're fortunate enough that we have some extended core programs here where students have different, I'm sure you've heard screaming, yelling. That's their communication. So they have grown up with students who are different from them. So for the most part, our kids are pretty accepting. If you expose them and let them ask questions and interact and get to know that person for who they really are, it's amazing what that does. And I think that's just human nature. That's humanity. If we would get to know people more and understand them better, we would grow. Good questions.
I'm just curious, how did you come to that level of acceptance, especially the LGBTQ issues, given, like you said, small town Iowa, where probably wasn't something that even
right
hit the light of
let
day.
me tell you, the implicit bias is real. I don't know that I have the definite answer to that. I just believe in people. My heart, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I believe in understanding where we are. I believe in the human race. And the day that I stop believing that there's good inside of everyone, I'm in the wrong job. Because I touch the lives of every single child who walks through these walls. And I owe it to them to honor and respect them and to try and help them through their years. That's why I became a teacher. That's why I became an administrator. I wanted a larger impact to make a difference. And some of my experiences, I have cousins who are gay. I have cousins who have married black men and have biracial children. I love people. And I wanted to know for myself. I think my experiences out in the world have taught me a lot about people. It's hard because I'm also very trusting and I get burned, but you gotta pick yourself up and keep going. And remember, not everybody's the same. I have mental health we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I have an aunt who is bipolar, schizophrenic. Yeah. She's in a facility. She's crazy. Yeah. And then I look at, I say that, you know, but it's the truth. And I also look at she's one of 8 kids that my grandparents have. 8. Each kid is so different. My dad is nothing like her. My dad is a servant leader. He was a fireman for 30-some years in Fort Dodge. He is an EMT. He still does volunteer firework on his spare time now, which is all the time. I know that my dad is the first one there when somebody falls at church. I know that my dad is also the first one there in the grocery store to help somebody. If somebody calls him and says, hey, I really need my windows washed and I just can't get it done, can you help? He's there. So I look at each, you know, if they come from the same parents, the same exact people, isn't that true about all of us? There's differences within each one of us, but that doesn't mean I don't love my aunt. I don't love some of the things that she does, or I don't love that she has to suffer and go through what she's going through. But I also don't think, oh, well, just because she is crazy, the rest of the family must all be crazy, which can sometimes happen in race, right? I think that that's a key component. If they have a bad experience with someone of another race, then they associate that with others. So I've learned to separate that. I don't follow that. I have come to terms with who my family is, who I am, and who I want to be.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I think that's the big thing, who you want to be, who you're committed to being, and then where that leads you. I think that's the critical thing. So I don't believe in just reacting to whatever goes on, in the general public and the government,
Right.
I'm going to be doing things what I know I have to do based on, a similar type of father, servant, leader, that type of, so there's just no way I'm going to do things other than, carry out that tradition, that pattern,
Absolutely.
And so when you kind of get that conviction after you kind of gone through life experiences, it just clarifies things for you, even though it may be confusing and chaotic outside, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow.
That's right.
And I think that's a kind of a big relief,
And there are things that happen that really change and shape you and change your minds, I mean, I've been through a lot. I was a teenage mom. I got pregnant at 16. Had my child when I was 17. My birthday is January 4th. Hers is Friday.
Wow.
I was 17 for a month. So not only was I a teenage mom who the dad left me at 6 months old. She was 6 months. She also had a stroke when she was born and has mild cerebral palsy and epilepsy.
Wow.
So I was raising a child, trying to get out of my childhood, finish high school, go on to college. My parents don't come from money. They have, again, my dad's a fireman, my mom was a secretary. So we did not have money. Everything that I've done is because I didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't, less than 10% of teenage moms ever graduate high school, less than 5% ever go on to college, and less than 1% further their education with a master's degree. I get to say I'm part of that 1%. I have a master's in education. So I've overcome things along my way, and the interactions that I have with people, I have my heart open. So continue to explore things, keep your heart open, and just never stop asking questions. All right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I look
And
forward to coming back.
yeah, absolutely.
I could talk for hours.
Yeah. I'll let you know when the Houston's is going to be in the syllabus. So I'll let you know.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I look forward to it. Yeah, 10 years is a long time now.